Hello again everyone. In my last video I looked at some of the reasons why you might buy a cheaper and older laptop to run as a daily driver. And on this video I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about how you select a laptop to fulfill that task. Now if you go onto eBay, which is going to be your primary source of sourcing an older laptop, then you'll see stuff that's listed on there that can be only up to 30 years old, and it commands some good prices. But quite clearly a laptop from 30 years ago is not going to be much use on the internet today. The reason why these laptops command such good prices is because of retro gaming. People have now like to go back and play these old games from 30 odd years ago, and you can play some of them on modern hardware today, but nothing beats playing it on the original hardware. So sellers on eBay have worked out that there's a demand for this stuff again, and it's quite amusing if you've been into PCs as long as I have, because 10 years ago all this old hardware that we were just throwing into skips that nobody wanted is now demanding some really high prices on eBay. And wow, I wish I'd kept some of that stuff I threw away. But anyway, if you're looking at a laptop that you're going to use as a daily driver, then you're immediately going to cut down how old that laptop's going to be, and you're really not going to go any more than 10 years old. There's a very good reason for that, because in 2006 Intel released their first multi-core processor, the Intel Core 2 Duo, and every modern device nowadays that has any form of internet connectivity has a multi-core processor. It's just the way things are. Web applications are very, very heavy. They need a lot of processing power before a web page can render inside your browser. Your browser is now become almost an operating system platform in its own right. And so if you have a single core processor, you'll soon notice that everything is a lot slower to load. So always look at a Core 2 Duo processor or better, which means you're going to buy a laptop that is no earlier than 2006 manufacture, because that's when the Core 2 Duo came out. Now Intel since that time have released a number of other processors that are even better, the i3, the i5, the i7 and now the i9. If you find those at a very low price, then yeah, pick them up. But I think in the price range we're looking at, remembering we're trying to keep laptops down to no more than £100 by the time you've upgraded them, then there's a good chance you'll pick up on eBay a Core 2 Duo laptop with maybe some bits missing for about £30, maybe slightly cheaper if you're lucky. So that's the first criteria: choose something with a multi-core processor. And when in later videos we look at some of the individual laptops I've already built, like this T61 in front of you, then I'll go through some in more detail about how you can check the specifications and find out what sort of processor a laptop can take. Because the nice thing about these commercial grade laptops is that they are designed to be taken apart and put back together, have bits changed, so it's very easy to, if you've got a slower processor in one, you can put a faster processor in. And the nice thing about the Core 2 Duos is they're very cheap as well to buy. So for example, this T61, it came with I think it was a 2 gigahertz processor, and I think it's now got a 2.4 gigahertz processor on it. So about 20% speed increase, and I think I paid £10 for the processor, but I got a laptop that runs 20% faster as a result. So they're good, they're cheap, and very plentiful, and it's a straightforward process to upgrade a processor on good commercial grade laptops. The second thing you need is memory, and you probably need to make sure it's got 4GB of memory at least. If you go to a laptop that is from around about 2006, 2007, you'll find that it will have the capacity to have up to 4GB of memory, pretty much definitely, especially if it has a Core 2 Duo processor. Some of them will even take more memory. I have found some that, if you look at the specification, they say that they can hold a maximum of 4GB of memory, but you can put 8GB in them with maybe a little degree of tweaking or maybe updating the BIOS on a laptop. But generally 4 GB is usually good enough for most purposes. Now, the downside of a laptop from 2007 is that was the time that Microsoft had released XP for some years and were releasing Windows Vista, which was the precursor to Windows 7. Now Windows XP and Windows Vista are no longer supported by Microsoft, they're no longer updated for security patches. And on a later video I'll talk a little bit more certainly about Windows XP, about what my feelings are on that. There are issues with running XP these days. It's not so much about security in my view, because security is about common sense and not going to bad websites on most occasions. But the problem with XP now is that software developers are stopping to make their software versions for XP, and so particularly things like the Chrome browser. Google are no longer making the Chrome browser for XP. In fact, they're not creating a 32-bit Chrome browser anymore, and XP is a 32-bit operating system. And so you are going to struggle to find browsers that work in XP as time goes forward, and it may get to a point where it simply becomes untenable to use as an operating system for the internet. And I think that's more of a problem than any so-called security issues, but more of that in a later video. I'm sure that will raise some interesting discussions on YouTube. So anyway, you're looking at 4 GB of memory, and you have to probably check the manufacturer's website to see what their drivers are released for, because I've got a Lenovo N200 laptop upstairs that I've rebuilt, for example, and if you go to Lenovo's website, they only have drivers for Windows XP and Windows Vista. Now, for this particular laptop in front of you, the T61, which is from about the same sort of time, you can get Windows 7 drivers for it. So technically, you could be running a supported Microsoft operating system on it, namely Windows 7, which is supported until 2020. The problem with that is that you are going to struggle to get later operating systems like Windows 8 or Windows 10 to run on them. So this may be the time to think, maybe to use this second laptop. Maybe as I said on the last video, you're using it as a way of not having to carry about that £1,000 MacBook Air with you all the time. And so if you're using this as a secondary laptop, or indeed if you're just trying to save a bit of money, not spend too much, it's a very good time to start having a look at Linux and using that, because Linux tends to be far more efficient than Windows in terms of what it uses for memory. It can run in less memory, and it can run on a lot more older hardware, and it's still supported and it's still secure. So that's probably an option to look at as well. But certainly at the moment you can get away with running Windows XP. The Firefox browser is still being supported for it, and Firefox in terms of internet capability is extremely good. It's as good as Chromium. Some would say it's even better than Google Chrome. But in September of 2017, Mozilla, who make the Firefox browser, will be again looking at how many XP users currently use Firefox, and will be make a decision about whether they're in support for it. So we still may be seeing a shortage of browsers on XP. So those are really the types of selection criteria you're looking at. In summary, you're looking at a laptop that is probably no more than 10 years old. You want a dual-core processor in it. If you can find a cheap i3, i5 or i7, dare I say it, then even better. And you want at least 4 GB of memory in it. And that's really the case whether or not you're running Linux or Windows. If you're running Windows XP still, just bear in mind it's a 32-bit operating system, and it can only use up to 3 GB of memory anyway, because that's what 32 bits allows it to do. So there's no point in putting more memory in a Windows XP laptop anyway. It just doesn't use it. Anyway, that's my second video done on this channel. The next video I'll look at some of the specific builds I've done, including this T61 in front of you, and we'll talk in more detail about what they cost, what you can do to upgrade it, and so on and so forth. So thank you for watching. Hit that like button if you like it. By all means subscribe, and speak to you again soon. Thank you and bye-bye.